Hi, welcome back to Our Town. My name is Chip Harrington. I'll be your host once again this week. This is our weekly show where we try to profile either different people or issues we have here in Ludlow on a regular basis. And today we're going to be talking to a name and a person who's very familiar to, I think, just about everybody in this community, and that is Mr. Durham Caldwell. Every Wednesday for the past several years, Durham has been either the editor or the contributing writer to the Ludlow Register. And you can see him on either page 9 or someplace within the Register, and usually has some comments and witty statements sometimes to make within the, I know he chases license plates around all the time too as well too. But Durham is here today, which you probably have read about in the Register and seen on TV. He has written a book. It's called Tumultuous Affairs. It is the subline title to it is Uncertain Politics and Unlikely Romance During a Turbulent Time. From 1964 to 1975. This is not a biography or anything along those lines, but it does take a look at a point in our history, our nation's history, where, as the title certainly suggests, the country was very divided. Civil rights was taking place. The Vietnam War was just getting started and then peaked during this time as well, too. Several assassinations during this time. And the city of Springfield itself was really going through a lot of struggles as well, along with the rest of the country. So Mr. Caldwell has taken the time to write a book based on some of the situations that took place around that time. So we're going to talk to Durham about this book and kind of the inspiration for it. So Durham, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
For coming in. I do appreciate it. Before we go into the heart of the book and all that, it's a pretty daunting process to write a book in this case. And what was the inspiration to put it? When did you first come up with this idea?
Well, I like to tell people, and there's a certain amount of truth to it, Chip, that every journalist feels that deep down inside he or she has the makings of the great American novel.
Mm-hmm.
So this floated around for a while, and I had a way I wanted to start a novel. I think, well, why not give it a try?
Mm-hmm.
So I joined the parade and sat down over a period of time and put this story into novel form. It's a lot of the things that actually happened in Springfield
mm-hmm.
and in other valley communities, wrapped in a mythical town called Riverbridge, and touching on the things that happened in the country during that time. As you mentioned, the divisiveness of the Vietnam War, Watergate, assassinations, and so forth. Those are all touched on, and to an extent, how they affected the local community, landing in the first men on the moon. This was a very dramatic time for the country. And taking it through 1975, as opposed to cutting it off a little earlier, well, 74 was the year that the fight over racial balance in inner city schools, especially Springfield, came to a head, mm-hmm. and carrying it over to from 74 to 75 gave us a way to let the personal part of it have an ending.
Mm-hmm. I was born in 1968, so right at the heart of your novel here too. And I certainly, even as a very young person, early 70s, can remember watching on TV. They would do I remember, it sticks out in my mind, they would do the body count. You'd watch the news and it would be how many Americans were killed that day, and they would do a body count. And at the time, I was very young, 4 or 5 years old at the time, but it even struck me at that time of just, a 4 or 5 year old kid, 6-year-old kid watching the news with his parents, and every day there was just common knowledge that, we lost 200 Americans today or 300 Americans today, and it really, that was just one aspect of how.
And even though this is a novel,
mm-hmm.
There are certain parts of it, certain things in it that are recounted just as they happened. In Northampton, for example, early on during the Vietnam War, there were some protesters from probably Smith College, Amherst, UMass, parading in the streets of Northampton against the war, carrying an American flag up at the front of their march. and some students from Northampton Commercial College, which no longer exists, but which was a very active school in the 60s, confronted these students from the more elite schools. And there was a confrontation that pretty just about came to blows, and the Northampton Police Department had to work like the devil to break them up. That's the only instance I can remember, though there may have been lots of others in the country, but the only one I can remember here in the Valley, where the opposing sides in an anti-war demonstration were both groups of college students. And we trace the novel doesn't linger heavily on the Vietnam War. The principals are in conversation repeatedly, sitting in the 1st Cavalry Division. What do they do? Why are they doing that? How can we win when we can't find the people we're fighting against? And like a college pep rally, when Westover sent over its first B-52s to the combat theater, off we go into the wild blue yonder, and so forth. And then the rather climactic scene is when the Westover POWs toward the very end of the bombing in 72, Westover B-52 crew got shot down, and Westover was a reception area for East Coast POWs after the war ended. And the last group to come home was Westover's own, and there was a tremendous outpouring welcome for them there on base, which is recounted in the book. And then the sad note at the end that some of their crewmates were still missing.
Right.
And as far as I know, never been found.
Yeah. Well, we should establish the fact, too, that you have a lot of history here. You were involved in, you were a news director for Channel 40. Prior to that, you were a radio news reporter as well, too. So just to establish this, why don't you give us your background as far as how long you were in Springfield and what kind of work you did at that time?
Well, I came to Springfield, Chip, in the spring of 1956 as news director at what was then radio station WSPR on Chestnut Street, and I stayed there for almost 6 years before I moved to WHYN radio up on Liberty Street. And WHYN TV, Channel 40, was in the same building, and a few months later I was also given the responsibility for news on Channel 40. So for 24 years or so after that, 1962 to 1986, I guess it was, I was running the news on Channel 40 and WHYN radio. I continued to run the news there up until sometime in the middle 70s, and I don't remember just exactly when it was that the two operations were split, and eventually WHYN radio was sold to a new owner and moved out of the building.
Right. So you certainly, your professional career brought you face to face with a lot of the issues that was facing Springfield at the time. Like we mentioned before, a lot of civil rights issues that were taking place at the time, and Springfield was